Queen Elizabeth I is remembered for her sharp mind, political genius, and commanding presence. But another, often overlooked detail of her life has fascinated historians for years: the awful state of her teeth. Her decaying smile doesn't just reveal her personal struggles, it opens a doorway into the health beliefs and strange beauty ideals of the Elizabethan world. She ruled with splendor and strength, but privately, Elizabeth faced a deeply personal battle. As she aged, her dental health took a steep decline. Eyewitnesses reported that her teeth were black, decaying, and likely painful. The cause? A deadly addiction shared by the entire English nobility: sugar. In this episode, we discuss the hidden truth about Queen Elizabeth's rotting teeth. At the beginning of the Tudor period, sugar was rare and valuable, something you might find in a medicine or see only at a royal feast. It was considered almost magical. Used in tiny amounts, it sweetened bitter herbs or covered up the taste of foul medicine. It was stored in tiny jars, treated like treasure. Only the richest families could afford even a little. But by the time Elizabeth was queen, the world had changed. England's booming global trade brought new sources of sugar from faraway places: the West Indies, East Indies, Morocco, and the Barbary Coast. Suddenly, what had once been a luxury became widely available to the wealthy, and Queen Elizabeth took full advantage. The Queen's sweet tooth was no secret. In her glittering royal court, sugar wasn't just something to eat. It was a spectacle, a performance of wealth and power. It was baked into luxurious cakes, molded into intricate pies, and transformed into dazzling confections that looked more like sculptures than desserts. These sugary masterpieces weren't served every day. They were saved for feasts, banquets, and celebrations, where they wowed foreign guests and local nobles alike. One of Elizabeth's absolute favourites was a delicacy called marchpane, also known as marzipan, a rich paste made from almonds and sugar. But this wasn't your average snack. The Queen's cooks and court artists would shape it into lifelike fruits, animals, castles, crowns, or even entire battle scenes, all coated in gold leaf or decorated with precious metals and dyes. The result was both food and art, a bold message that said, "I am powerful enough to eat beauty itself." These sugary creations weren't just indulgences, they were statements. To have sugar meant you had money. To use it in such extravagant ways meant you had a lot of money. Elizabeth's court became the epicenter of this new culinary fashion. Nobles copied her habits, and sugar quickly became a symbol of elite status across the country. Even in everyday meals, it started showing up in places where it didn't belong. People were putting sugar on meat, fish, and even vegetables, all to show they could afford it. The more sugar you used, the wealthier and more important you looked. Over time, the idea of restraint disappeared. Sweetness wasn't just for flavor anymore, it was a social weapon. Sugar entered wines, stews, salads, and even medicines, until people were practically poisoning themselves with sweetness, and Elizabeth was leading the trend. But this obsession came at a terrible cost. As sugar consumption skyrocketed among the wealthy, so did the damage to their teeth, and Elizabeth was no exception. Her love for sweets slowly turned her mouth into a battlefield. Over the years, her teeth darkened, broke down, and decayed. By all accounts, they eventually turned black, a condition impossible to hide. It would have been clearly visible to everyone around her: courtiers, diplomats, even suitors. Her teeth didn't just rot, they broadcast her habits to the world. Foreign envoys noted it, her subjects whispered about it. The Queen of England was falling apart behind her ruby lips. Bizarrely, black teeth became a symbol of wealth and privilege. In a society obsessed with appearances, rotting teeth became fashionable among the upper classes. Some people, especially from the lower ranks, would go as far as staining their teeth with soot or charcoal just to mimic the rich. Imagine that. People were ruining their own smiles to pretend they had access to the same deadly luxury that was destroying the Queen. That's how deeply sugar had infected the culture. Elizabeth's tooth decay was more than a personal problem. It was the physical face of an entire nation's addiction. Elizabeth's own attempts at dental care only made things worse. In an age before toothbrushes, toothpaste, or even a real understanding of hygiene, people relied on homemade mixtures and folk remedies. Early in life, Elizabeth reportedly cleaned her teeth with honey, thinking it would freshen her breath and leave a pleasant scent. Later, people began using sugar pastes to polish their teeth, believing sugar itself was a cleansing agent. These misguided routines not only failed to protect their mouths, they actively sped up the decay. With no toothbrushes, no floss, and no knowledge of bacteria, people were essentially rotting their own teeth faster in the name of cleanliness. Elizabeth's daily dental routine was likely made up of smearing, rubbing, and rinsing with sticky, sweet concoctions. Instead of removing decay, they fed the very bacteria that caused it. Her teeth weakened year by year, and unlike the poor, who eventually lost teeth early in life, Elizabeth couldn't simply pull them all out. She needed to appear whole, commanding, and queenly. But her mouth told a different story. When it came to dental treatment, the situation was just as grim. There were no professional dentists in Tudor England. The job of pulling teeth fell to barber surgeons, the same men who cut hair, performed minor surgeries, and even pulled out bullets. They didn't have sterilized tools or pain relief. There was no anesthesia, no numbing cream, no gentle techniques. Tooth extractions were done with sharp, rusty instruments, and patients were expected to grit their teeth, if they still had them, and endure the agony. Elizabeth, unsurprisingly, had a deep fear of these procedures. One famous story tells how she refused to have a rotten tooth pulled until a bishop agreed to have one of his teeth removed first, just to prove the pain was bearable. That's how terrified she was. Her fear allowed the rot to continue, unchecked, for years. Each time she delayed, the decay worsened, until her smile became misshapen, painful, and visibly infected. Descriptions of Elizabeth throughout her life show how this dental decline shaped her image. In her youth, she was praised for her face, her complexion, her expressive eyes, and especially her graceful hands. She used those hands dramatically while speaking, drawing attention to her poise and elegance. At 22, she was considered handsome, a powerful word for a woman of rank. At 24, she was called comely. Not stunning, but tall, well-formed, and with a healthy, glowing skin tone. Her youth was her shield. Portraits painted during this period show a confident, stylish queen with smooth skin and closed lips, a subtle way to hide what lay beneath. As she aged, the reports grew less flattering. By 32, only 7 years into her reign, Elizabeth had begun to speak of her beauty in a more modest, almost joking way. She admitted she was never truly beautiful, but still insisted on controlling her image. Mirrors were carefully chosen, portraits were retouched. Artists were instructed to idealize her face, not reflect the truth. But by her 60s, even these efforts couldn't stop the gossip. At 64, a French ambassador described her as very aged, long and thin, with uneven and yellow teeth. At 65, the German traveller Paul Hentzner offered a crueler description. Her face was fair but wrinkled, her eyes black and pleasant but small, her nose hooked, and her teeth black. He noted that this was common in England, a fault the English seemed to suffer from because of their great use of sugar. He even mentioned that she wore false red hair, revealing how much of her appearance had become artificial. Elizabeth had become a walking illusion, a powerful ruler whose own body told a very different story. It's important to treat these accounts with some caution. Only a few first-hand descriptions of her teeth have survived, and not all may be accurate. Some observers may have exaggerated her flaws for political reasons. Others were foreigners, unaccustomed to English habits. But even so, the consistent reports of blackened, decaying teeth suggest a very real problem, one that became impossible to ignore. And yet, her legacy is not defined by her rotting smile. Despite the physical toll sugar and fear took on her, Elizabeth remains one of the most powerful, admired, and unforgettable rulers in history. Her dental decline is just one piece of a much larger puzzle, a detail that tells us more about the world she lived in than about her character. She led England through wars, plots, and golden years of culture. She transformed a divided kingdom into a global force. She gave her name to an entire age. Still, her blackened teeth remind us of the hidden cost of power and indulgence. In Tudor England, sugar meant status, and people paid for it with their health. Elizabeth's refusal to endure pain, her devotion to sweets, and her strange hygiene habits all reflected the dangers of living in a world where pleasure outpaced knowledge. She may have ruled with strength and brilliance, but inside her royal mouth, a quieter tragedy was unfolding, one that no crown could cover.